The Planned Maintenance System, PMS, is foundational to material readiness in the Navy. Every day on every Navy ship, hundreds of PMS checks are performed on a variety of equipment. The sailors performing these checks are qualified through a combination of schools, training, and PQS to a degree of technical expertise that should allow them to correctly perform these checks. In order to confirm that the maintenance was performed in accordance with established procedures, a small sample of them is verified by senior observers using a process called a PMS spot check. This video will provide the basic references, requirements, and skills required to perform these spot checks and maintain the integrity of the PMS program. The requirements for a spot check are found in the Joint Fleet Maintenance Manual, the 3M Manual, which is NAVC Instruction 4790.8, and in the Type Commander instructions. The steps required for a spot check are contained in the Type Commander instruction and evaluated using a spot check form, which will form the basis for this video. Most of the steps are self-explanatory, but we will cover each one in order to ensure that you understand the process. Historical spot checks are conducted on fully accomplished checks from the accountability log. Per the Joint Fleet Maintenance Manual, there is no need for the maintenance person to reperform the entire check. You should observe enough to convince yourself that proper tools and procedures were used and that the maintenance was actually performed satisfactorily. Let's go to a work center and observe the preparations for a spot check. DC2 Sal Frank has a spot check scheduled today at 1300. He will prepare by verifying that his name is on the RADM list of qualified personnel and that he has the correct check listed in the weekly schedule. He will then pull the Maintenance Requirements Card, or MRC, and make sure that he has the required tools and materials available and on station. At this point, he is ready for the observer to arrive and begin the spot check. Lieutenant J.G. Salvatore has been assigned the spot check for this week. In preparation, he may need to do some homework and research. If he is not familiar with the system in question, a look at the NAVC Tech Manual or Ship's Information Book may help. Once he is prepared for the spot check, we will head down to the work center to begin. Let's start with the 43 Papa 1, the Work Center PMS Manual. This book has several required documents, and there is no requirement to check them all, but it is always a good idea to briefly review the book, because it is a good indicator of how well the PMS program is being maintained. Lieutenant J.G. Salvatore will verify that DC2 Sal Frank has the correct qualifications as listed on the MRC, the Maintenance Requirement Card. Next, there is a verification that the MRC is in fact the correct card. Starting with the MRC, Lieutenant J.G. Salvatore will check that the MRC is listed on the Maintenance Index page, or MIP. He will then ensure that the Maintenance Index page is listed on the LOPE, the list of effective pages. Finally, he will verify that the record of changes for the 43 Papa 1 is up to date and properly signed. At this point, he has determined that the correct PMS check was performed and that the DC2 is qualified to perform it. Now we're ready to start. The maintenance person should show familiarity with the card. After all, he did just perform the maintenance requirement. Starting with the scheduling notes and safety precautions, he should demonstrate a basic understanding of the check and any precautions or restrictions that it entails. There is no need to read each line as long as he can convince the observer that he understands the entire check. Next, required tools and materials are presented. In general, the items listed on the card are specifically required, but some substitutions are required by the 3M Manual or the Standard PMS Materials Identification Guide, often referred to as the SPMIG. If test gear or torque wrenches are used, check the calibration sticker for periodicity. When in doubt, the ship's 3MC can provide advice on whether a substitution is allowed by the work center supervisor. When hazardous materials or conditions are expected as part of the maintenance, proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, is required. This is an area where attention to detail is necessary. Using the wrong PPE, even the wrong size, could result in injury. Check the requirements carefully because many items have specific differences. For example, some checks require vented goggles and some require non-vented. This is usually based on the type of hazmat used. Gloves come in different styles, thicknesses, and materials. Electrical safety gloves are not interchangeable with chemical gloves. There is a glove matrix in the Force Revision that lists over 37 types of gloves and their purposes. Make sure you have the right type. Check the material condition of the PPE. A scratched face shield is difficult to see through. If the maintenance person has to lift it out of the way to see, that defeats the purpose. Gloves with rips or tears will not protect against caustic agents or electric shock. You should verify that the hazmat used is properly labeled, and you might want to check the HAZMIN system to ensure that the proper quantity was indeed checked out and properly stored for the check. Another system you can cross-check is the tag-out system, or ESOMS. If the MRC calls for a tag-out in accordance with ship's instructions, you should check the ESOMS line item record sheet and verify that tags were indeed hung and cleared for the duration of the check. The maintenance person should now work through the check, demonstrating that he or she was able to follow the steps in the correct order from start to finish. During this process, you should be able to determine that the maintenance person is in fact familiar with the check and that it was actually performed. You may need to look for evidence that the check was actually performed. Some examples that you may encounter include: for lubrication checks, is there evidence of recent application? If screws or bolts need to be removed, are they painted over? If readings were taken, are they recorded and do they make sense? Does the maintenance person appear comfortable with the operation of the equipment? The 3M manual requires the maintenance person to report completion of the MRC to the work center supervisor. Any discrepancies must be documented, normally in the ship's CSMP. This includes not just issues with the equipment being checked, but material issues in the immediate vicinity. For example, a valve dripping in the overhead on the equipment being checked should also be noted and entered in the CSMP. Note that there are certain line items on the spot check form that result in immediate failure of the check. These are marked by an asterisk. The points assigned to each line item are all or nothing. There is no partial credit. When you have completed the check, take a moment to review things with the maintenance person. Correct minor omissions or mistakes on the spot and note any positive aspects of the check as well. Spot checks are a good indicator of how the ship does business. Proper storage, cleanliness, and good housekeeping procedures are indications of good engineering practice. You should also make sure the maintenance person understands the reason for the check and how the equipment operates. This process is not about blindly following the checks on the card, but about maintaining equipment in peak operating condition. If you do call a spot check unsat, consider the reason and possible root causes. If the cause is related to the card itself, a feedback report may be called for. If there were issues with PPE, hazmat, or tag-out, there could be larger problems in the division or the department. Be sure to ask questions and drill down to the root cause. A failed spot check is not the end of the world. It may uncover a training issue, a process issue, or some other systematic problem that can now be addressed. If you do have issues or questions, check with your ship's 3M coordinator.